myself and we'll get rolling here. My name is Rachel Barkley, and I'm with the Department of Dietetics and Nutrition here at KU Med. And I'm on the Healthy U Committee for campus, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk with you about ways to make best food choices. And so what we will do today is go through examples, and I have, if you can sit at the tables where there are foods and packets, you can actually take a look at some of the labels to, do your own analysis to try to figure out what is the best choice for you. There are two sets of handouts. One set of handouts has the slides, and you can take notes. The second set is just backup materials on some of the topics that we didn't really cover very in depth, but just in case you wanted more information. And also the slides are going to be available, so that's why we're doing the recording, so that if you want to look at the slides at a later time, they will be available, and I imagine Carrie can tell us how to access them. And I do encourage you to stop me if something's not clear, or if you have a comment or experience that you would like to share. And if you need to leave, just get up and go, because I know we're all busy people, and you probably have other things that you've got to take care of. So today we're going to focus mainly on the nutrition facts label, and then also how you can interpret that information to use it to make a wise choice about, am I going to purchase this food first off and bring it into my house, and then secondly, am I going to eat it, and how much of it will I eat? And then also to increase your awareness of the ways that manufacturers may mislead you or get you to buy a product that maybe you really don't need, or make you think that a product has characteristics that it really doesn't have. So those are the three main topics that we'll address today. So this is what we're going to be looking at, the nutrition facts label. And most of the foods, I think all the foods on the table pretty much have a facts label on them, so that you can actually take a look at them as we're going through the presentation. Much of this material comes off of the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration website, so that if you want to take an in-depth look, you can actually go and review all this material there. It's also a great resource to go to, because as things change, or as foods are recalled, or new regulations are put forth, you can go there and, as a consumer, get your own information and also submit complaints. So it's very important. So there are different sections of the food label, and we are going to start out at the top and work our way down. So the most important factor is serving size. You need to look at what the serving size is on the package. You need to see how many servings are in the container. I think many of us make the assumption that when we buy a package, especially if it's a smaller package, that, the serving size must be the whole package. Not true. You've got to read carefully. Look at, I have a bowl up here with cereal, Cheerios. In fact, if one of you wants to get up and pick it up, the big bowl, and that's probably what I'd eat, I measured it out, that's 2 cups. The little bowl has 1 cup. If you look at the Cheerios, the plain old Cheerios, read the label and tell me what a serving size is. It's 1 cup. Now look at the other Cheerios, whatever kind that is. I forget, Honey Nut. What's their serving size? Read the other Cheerios. What's their serving size? So, even within a similar product, same company, they have 3 different serving sizes. And then we ourselves have our own idea what a serving size is. I mean, a lot of us, we just fill the bowl up. So you get the big bowl, you got twice as many. So sometimes our calories could be way off and the other nutrients because we're not measuring. We have no concept of what the actual serving is. So that's probably the most important point to remember, is check the serving size. Typically, it's going to be listed in like units, like cups, or however many pieces, and then it may have the number of grams. Those of us that live in the U.S., grams are meaningless, but it's there should you have a scale and you want to weigh your product. So just that's the most important concept to remember. Also, you need to check to see if the food is prepared or unprepared. For example, I think some of you have like rice or oatmeal. You might have a pasta like macaroni and cheese on the table. It may list the portion for the food unprepared. It may list both prepared and unprepared. So sometimes you're going to have to figure this out yourself. And if it's something product where you're adding components, that's going to change the portion after it's cooked. It's going to change the nutritional value, like the mac and cheese. Those dinners, you're adding different kinds of milks. You could be adding different kinds of butter, margarine, whatnot. So just be aware what's on the package may not be what you think you're getting. So pay attention. You're going to have to do some math. Basically, you're either going to be multiplying or dividing, depending on if you're having a bigger portion or a smaller portion. And that's just an example of the mac and cheese. And just remember, it applies to the other nutrients in the food. And as I said, if you're adding components, just be aware what you add will impact the calories and nutrients. Like if you're having the cereal, you use 1% milk, you're going to have a certain calorie fat value. You use 2% or whole, calories fat will go up. So serving sizes are not standardized, period. Buyer, be aware of this. Many of us consume too many calories, too much fat. We know that more than 2/3 of Americans are overweight. And actually, I think I read yesterday, we actually have a higher number of people that are obese than overweight among adults. So this is important that we check the calories and the fat. And there are some rules about calories, kind of rule of thumb per serving of food. Generally, if a serving is 40 calories or below, that's considered a low-calorie food. Moderate is in the 100-calorie range, and then high would be 400 calories or more per serving. So that's kind of a rule of thumb that you could use just when you're in the store looking at a product, trying to decide if I got to choose this one or this one. The other thing to be aware of is the info on the nutrition facts label is based on 2,000 calories per day for a standard like adult. If you're trying to lose weight, you will need less than that. You'll probably need 1,200 to 1,800 depending on your size and gender and how active you are. If you're very physically active, you're going to need more than that. So this is just a general guide. That's not to say everybody needs 2,000 calories a day. But all of their values are based on that standard. So on the label, it'll tell you the calories for that serving, but then how many of those calories come from fat. So that's just to help you to figure out, is this mainly a fat-laden product versus a product that doesn't have much fat. Not that all fat is bad, but that's just kind of a rule. So any questions on that or comments? Okay, next we're going to look at the portion of the label that has nutrients that you really want to eat less of. So they're listed first, and that's because we know they contribute to many chronic illnesses that are present in our country. So it's total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, sodium. If you look at some food labels, they will also list some other fats, some of the more healthier fats like the polyunsaturated fats and the monounsaturated fats, but by law they're not required to do so. But the ones that you really want to watch out for and that you're generally trying to limit will be total, saturated, trans, and sodium. On cholesterol, the latest dietary guidelines for Americans, they are loosening the standard on dietary cholesterol. So we're not really going to focus on it as much anymore. It used to be a recommendation, but they're finding from the latest scientific studies that they reviewed over the decades that dietary cholesterol does not have a significant impact on blood cholesterol and bad cholesterol, as does total fat, saturated fat, and trans fat. So the focus is really on those dietary components, not so much on dietary cholesterol. We make cholesterol within our own bodies, and then there's your genetic tendency, to have a higher cholesterol. But they're finding that dietary cholesterol intake does not have the impact that we once thought it did. So, one less worry there, and you can eat an egg a day with the yolk. So, woohoo. Trans fat has been in the news lately because the FDA is now going to require manufacturers to take them out of foods totally by, I think, 2015, something like that. So, okay, so you will see it's listed by grams and then the percent daily value. And you will see trans does not have a daily value, and that's because it's not recommended. I mean, it's like you should not eat it. Next, we'll take a more in-depth look at nutrients to limit fat. The range of fat calories for most people that's advised is 20 to 35% of your calories from fat. And if you wanted to look at grams per day, the range is 44 to 78 if you're on a 2,000 calorie diet. Example is if you're trying to get 30% of your calories from fat, it'd be about 65 grams. That's kind of a moderate goal. You want to keep saturated below 10%. So the remaining fat should come from the good fats, the monos and the polys. So if you're trying to keep saturated below 10%, that'd be about 20 grams per day if you're eating 2,000 calories. Another word on trans fats, manufacturers are allowed to list 0 on their food label if one serving of that food has up to 0.5 grams of trans. So just be aware that if you read a label and it says it has 0 trans, it doesn't necessarily mean it's really 0. And if you're eating a larger serving, say 2 or 3, you could be getting several grams in quite easily. So that's just something that you should be alert to, and that, we know that foods that have hydrogenated vegetable oils will have trans in them. So things like, Crisco's, some of your margarines, a lot of like baked goods. So just be aware of that. You may think, I'm doing really well, but that's why the FDA is changing that ruling. Yes? 0. That is the current recommendation. And if you want to read more about it in the list of references, but that's 0 is it, because they are very damaging to your heart health. Currently, sodium is 2,300 milligrams, and if you look at the label on the daily values at the bottom, it'll say that the daily value is 2,400 milligrams. That's based on older recommendations, and the latest guidelines for most Americans is 2,300 milligrams, unless you fall into certain categories, like you have diabetes, hypertension, you're over 51, African American. I think I've covered most of them. Then it's 1,500 milligrams per day. So just be aware that's a little bit different. Another rule of thumb is just try to pick a product where the serving for one of those items is under 20% daily value. That's just a rule of thumb that you can consider using. Now, next we'll look at the items that most of us want to focus on and try to get more of, and that would be several vitamins, and I've listed the ones that we know are of greatest concern in our population. a couple of minerals, calcium, magnesium, dietary fiber, and then also for young women, adolescent women, and premenopausal women, iron is also a concern. Now, food labels are required to list some vitamins, but they don't have to list all of them. But if they fortify their product, or they make a claim, it definitely has to be on the food label. So you won't always see a long list, and you can look at some of your products, like the cereals will probably have a huge long list because they do add quite a few to supplement their product. And again, it'll list only the percent. So if you want to actually look at how many milligrams or micrograms or grams of one of these items, you would have to do your math. And you would have to look at the bottom of the label where it lists the total recommendation for the day. So the main value here is that you can look at, oh, calcium, this product has 20%, so it's a pretty good source, whereas it has no fiber. So I'm not going to count on it to help me get fiber. Also on fiber, some of the products will list it as soluble and insoluble, so they'll break it down even further. Looking at the bottom of the label, that's where the daily value is listed, and it's based on 2,000 calories. They also list one for 2,500, but if you look at the percentages, it's actually on the top part of the label. That's based on the 2,000 calorie standard. And just an example, the dietary fiber is listed as 25 grams. If you ate this 1 cup of Cheerios, it gives you about 3 grams of fiber if I did my math. So if I wanted to look it up, or if I wanted to do it for some of the vitamins. So I think the main purpose of the daily value is just really to have a general guide so that you can see what foods are higher or lower, and then just be aware that, like, if I ate a really high-fat food for breakfast, I probably should, go easy the rest of that meal and or the rest of the day so that I don't exceed my fat allowance. So that's the main way I use it, is just to kind of okay, this was super high in sodium. I know I shouldn't be eating other salty foods the rest of the day. Now, there are some nutrients that don't have a daily value. I already mentioned the trans fat. Protein doesn't have a daily value listed, and it only has to tell you that if they make a claim, like this food is high in protein. Like, for example, I think those Cheerios are high in protein, so I think they would have to have that listed. Sugars, there's no reference value. I do know that I think in future versions of the food label, because the dietary guidelines that are being proposed this year are setting standards for added sugar, and I think eventually on the food label they're going to also list added sugars beyond just what was naturally occurring in the product. But currently, the recommendation is less than 10% of your calories per day should come from added sugars, and that would be less than 50 grams per day. And just to give you an idea, like a tablespoon has about 15 grams, so that'd be several tablespoons of sugar if you're eating 2,000 calories. Okay, any questions? Yes? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. No. And that's why you read the label, because we fell into the trap. A lot of us consumers thought if it said fat-free, it's good. Well, you forget that when they take the fat out, they have to add other ingredients in to get the taste, the texture, etc., and so that you may end up with a product that is not as good health-wise. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, and that's why, yeah, so in future labeling, that eventually will show added sugars, yes. Yeah, but that's good. That's why you do have to read the labels and compare. You can't just assume, this is going to be better, because it may not be overall for your health. And again, I think a lot of times we do always assume, oh, well, if it's less fat, less calories, it's always going to be a healthier choice. It may not be, just depending on the other components, like the sugar, the salt. That's another thing, too. When they modify, a lot of times they have to add extra sodium or salt in to make it taste better. So, good point. The other thing is, compare your products. Sometimes, you just mentioned, like, you may think, oh, 2% versus non-fat. Well, if you look at some of the key vitamins and minerals, they're very similar. The main difference is the calories, the fat, the saturated fat. So I know sometimes people say, oh, I hate low-fat milk, fat-free or 1%. But if you are striving to reduce calories, that's an easy way to do it and reduce your fat. So I think sometimes that's why you do have to make those judgments. What's my health goal? What am I trying to achieve? I'm going to mention carbohydrate counting, and that's because many people have diabetes, and many people use the strategy of counting carbs. And to do that, you can do it using the food labels. Main thing to be alert is that one carb portion is 15 grams. And the other key thing to look at is you look at total carbs. So on the food label, it'll list total carbohydrate. It also lists sugars. And sometimes people get confused and they think, oh, sugar is bad for people with diabetes. I should just look at sugar. No, you look at total carbohydrates, because the sugar is included in that figure along with other naturally occurring carbs. And you need to look at total carbs. So then you would divide the value for that serving by 15 grams, and that'll tell you how many carb servings that you could have from this product. This example had 31 grams of carbs. You divide by 15, so it's going to be 2 carb portions. So the key thing is just reading the correct carbs, but then also being aware of your serving sizes. Many people with diabetes, for each meal, might strive to eat anywhere from 3 to 5 carb portions at a meal, depending on their size and if they want to lose weight, whatever. But it can be used for this purpose. But the key thing is be aware of what serving you're actually eating, and then to do your math. You're going to have to do your math to figure out the carb portions, because, again, servings aren't standard. So you can't assume that they're going to be the same. The ingredient list. If you look at some of the foods on your table, if you look at the bottom, there should be a listing of what is in that product. And it's listed in descending order by weight. Now, sometimes there's products that are standardized and they may not be required to list every ingredient. But that is another useful tool, because if you want to check, does this have things I want to, restrict or try to reduce in my diet, like added sugars, so you can look at the list. If you see they're adding lots of different kinds of items that sound like they're sugar-like, if they say oats in them, you could have 3 or 4 different kinds. Or you could check for items that you want to actually make sure you want to incorporate in your diet, like, does this product use olive oil in it? So that can be very helpful to look at the ingredient list. Also looking at, I want to avoid colors. That's the new thing that I just heard on the news and read it last night about. General Mills is pulling any of the artificial colors from their colorful cereals like Trix. So, and again, that's just people concerned about, the potential health issues relating to food coloring. So it is another tool to look at on the label. Also, food allergens. Packaged foods that are regulated by FDA have to identify 8 of the major food allergens. So they don't list every one, or they're not going to advise you to every potential food allergen, but the major ones, which are milk, egg, fish, crustaceans, shellfish, tree nuts, wheat, peanuts, and soybeans. And they will state it on the package, and there's 2 different options. So one, they could just say it contains these products, and then in the other, I think it has it identified in those parentheses. Organic and natural food labeling. The United States Department of Agriculture actually defines what the organic labeling requirements are. So not FDA, but USDA. 100% organic, everything in it must be certified organic. So there are certification programs, and the processing must be, and then they'll have that label. And some of you may have products on your table that have that label. Natural, many foods you will see will say natural. Like I go to the meat counter, it'll say natural. Some of these peanut butters say natural. That does not have a legal definition. So nobody's regulating that at this point in time. Usually the food doesn't contain added colors, artificial flavors, or other synthetic substances, but you can't be guaranteed of that. In your handout packet, there is a page in there that has more details about organic foods so that you can, because there are different degrees of what's organic. One question that you might have is, should I buy everything organic? There are different reasons for choosing to purchase organic foods. Some people, it's mainly because of concerns about the environment. Others, it's health concerns for themselves, their families, and the people, the farm workers and people that handle the foods. Organic foods may or may not be more expensive. It depends on what they are and where you buy them. Consumer Reports just recently did a really good article on when to buy organic foods. And I'm going to play the little link, but there's also another link that actually has the article, so that if you want to look at the article, you can do that. One key thing is when you're looking at like produce, be sure to check the country of origin, because some of their recommendations when it's okay to buy non-organic is that if you buy it from certain countries. So you do have to check and see, where they say that produce comes from. So we'll watch it. This is like a 2-minute clip, which hopefully we'll get it to play. Oh, goodness. Well, maybe not. I don't want to waste our time here.
Here at Consumer Reports, we believe you should buy organic fruits and vegetables whenever possible. This can reduce your exposure to potentially harmful pesticides and protect the environment and farmers who grow our food. But we know organic produce can be expensive and sometimes hard to find. So we've developed guidelines based on government data about levels of pesticide residue found on produce. The guidelines let you know when buying organic is a must, and when you can opt for conventionally grown produce. We'll have a cheat sheet for 10 popular items in a moment. First though, remember, it's important to eat a diet rich in fruits and veggies, period. Organic just makes those choices even better. Scientists, including our own here at Consumer Reports, believe the use of a combination of pesticides in the food supply raises health concerns, from cancer to birth defects, though the long-term effects of dietary exposure are unknown. Children face some of the greatest risks because their bodies and brains are still developing. Let's start with 5 popular fruits and vegetables you should always try to buy organic. Fresh peaches grown conventionally fall into our high-risk category for pesticide residues. A good alternative if you can't get organic? Canned peaches, which are very low. Carrots are lower risk than some other types of produce, but you should still buy organic. No matter what kind you buy, you should wash them, but don't peel them. You lose nutrients if you do. Strawberries fall into our high-risk category, but if you can't find organic, conventional raspberries and blueberries are low risk, so they're a good alternative. Pesticide risk for green beans hasn't fallen in 20 years. even though progress has been made for other produce, such as grapes and pears. Conventional sweet bell peppers, domestic and imported, fall into our high and very high risk category. For other fruits and vegetables, some non-organic versions are about as safe as organic when it comes to pesticide residues, but it matters where it comes from. Look for broccoli grown in the US and Mexico. They're in our low and very low risk groups. Conventional oranges are low risk to eat, but if you're using the zest, opt for organic. That's because the USDA measures pesticide residues after citrus peels and rinds have been removed. Whether in a bag, a box, or loose, it's always a good idea to wash your lettuce. And if you have a head of lettuce, remove outer leaves. One of the easiest choices, onions from the countries in our analysis were low risk. Red or green grapes from Chile, Mexico, Peru, or the US are in our low risk category. Here's a quick cheat sheet for your next trip to the store. For our full risk guide on fruits and vegetables, visit consumerreports.org.
Any questions or comments on? Yes. Uh-huh. I personally buy organic, free range. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the main issue is just the matter of how they're, the chickens are fed, organic feed, and then also how they're handled too, and then antibiotics. So, I mean, there are a lot of factors to look at. And then, of course, there's your budget. So, I mean, there's, and that's why I think if somebody says, I want to buy, do 100% organic, I mean, I think it's, for many of us, first off, you might not be able to find everything that way, and second off, the cost could be pretty exorbitant. And, for example, like with produce, I think overall for your health, it'd be better to eat more produce than to, like, restrict produce because you can't afford to buy it because you can't get it all organic. And that's why I think this is useful to at least maybe these are the ones you want to focus on to try to spend your few dollars on that product if you can. Yes. Well, one of the handouts I have goes through the different levels. Yes. So, yeah, you do have to read carefully. Because, I mean, there's different categories. So that's why, just because it says, you do have to look at what category it falls into. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. And something could say organic, it still not be that healthy of a choice. Because, like I say, organic sugar. Sorry, it could be organic, but not the best health choice. So that's why you have to use your judgment. You have some wisdom, and don't get misled. Because there's some things that's just like, I'm sorry, not a good choice. And as I said, check country of origin. So for some of those products that they said it's fine to buy them, non-organic, but make sure you're picking the right country because different countries have different rules about pesticide use and then the degree of regulation they have to ensure that it truly is organic. Because, I mean, somebody has to be checking that stuff. It's not like it just happens. A lot of it won't wash off, but if you peel things, sometimes the peel you can remove some. It just depends on peaches are. I think it's because they use a lot of fungicides on them. Because if you braise peaches, they get lots of worms and all that. And if we want it to look pretty. When I grew up, I'm a rural kid, and we had raised our own fruit and had a big garden and all this. I mean, we just cut around the worms and bugs. But, nowadays, I think consumers don't like that. But, I mean, that's what we used to do. We just cut it out, sometimes you might have eaten part of a worm and, oh well. Yeah, protein. Yes. All right. Other questions about organic? And just my own, and if you read the whole Consumer Reports article, and I'm not promoting them, but I'm just telling you my own personal experience, Trader Joe's has pretty reasonably priced organic foods. In fact, like peppers, a lot of times I don't go there every week, but when I go there, I'll usually buy their 3-pack of organic peppers because they're really reasonably priced compared to other stores. So, I mean, there are some places where you could get a better value. Okay, next we're going to talk about gluten-free labeling, and that's because there are so many people now that are concerned about gluten. The main people that need to avoid gluten are people that have celiac disease, and this is diagnosed. It affects your immune system, and it causes a reaction in the small intestine. Gluten is naturally in these 4 grains, so wheat, rye, barley, and crossbreeds, and products that are made of those grains. So sometimes you may think, oh, soy sauce or something, it shouldn't have gluten. Well, they use products that are derivatives. So that's why you do kind of have to be aware of the fact it's not just going to be grain products. It could be in other foods. In 2013, the FDA had a regulation put forth that now the food has to be totally free of gluten in order to be labeled gluten-free, because before there were no standards here. There are some foods that are naturally free of gluten. They don't have to have a label on them, but many products are going ahead and doing it just because they know it's a good marketing tool. So you will see that appearing on many packages of foods that normally don't have gluten, things like oils and fruits and veggies. But they know that they could get more sales. So, and you may see some products out here that have that. I think there's the oil, right? I think there's some, there are some crackers that are mainly made from seeds, and that's legit, because people will think, there could be grains in them. And just because something says gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthier. So you can eat gluten-free and have not a healthy diet. Yeah, right. Yeah, sugar's gluten-free, so that's gluten-free. I mean, so that's why don't be misled. So, health claims may appear on food labels. FDA regulates this, and they have standards that they set forth, and there's a list of health claims that are approved for certain food components. And if you go to their website, you can see the list. And there's an example with Cheerios. If you look at their package, I think it says Cheerios can help lower cholesterol as part of a heart-healthy diet, and it's based on the reduced risk of heart disease associated with the soluble fiber in it. So there are certain health claims that can appear legitimately on food labels. There could be nutrient content claims, so it might say free, high, or low. You could say more, reduced, or light, like those salad dressings. I think like the Fritos, there's a lightly salted. And again, those have specific definitions about how they're altered and what percent. And then there can be structure and function claims on food labels, explain the role of the nutrient or the component in the food and how it impacts the structure of the body. For example, the easy one, calcium builds strong bones. So if the product has calcium in it, they can put that claim on their product. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, they've gotten a lot of press and they're very controversial. It's estimated around 70% of foods sold contain some GMOs in them. Food manufacturers in this country are not required to label that or indicate the food with GMO. It's voluntary right now. FDA will provide guidance if people want it, but it's not required. Some states have put forth rules, like I think Vermont, Maine, can't remember who else. However, they've been stalled because industry is threatening legal action. So More will probably be coming of this. And there's a handout in your packet that has more information from the FDA website about genetically engineered foods in case you want to read more. But right now, lots of controversy, not much action. European Union, I think they do label which foods are, have GMOs in them. I think many people mainly just want to know, but we are seeing in the restaurant industry, some restaurants are starting to move in that direction, identifying, and part of it is I think they realize there's a big market for that. So, misleading labels. First one is to shrink the serving size to make the food appear healthier. Very common practice. That helps them with the trans fat issue, first off. So that is a ploy. Not stating the nutrient content of the whole package when the people normally eat the whole package. Like, you have some of those chip bags that are about this size, and, they might, let's say it's 3 servings. Okay, get real. Somebody opens the package, they eat the whole package. So, promoting nutrients that are added or reduced in a product, especially a highly processed product, to make it sound healthier. So, the hot nutrients now are things like protein, fiber, calcium, or saying it's gluten-free or lightly salted. So just be aware of the fact that, it's a ploy to get more sales. It's not necessarily going to be the best choice for you. FDA does send front of package violations to food companies when their labels are misleading or incorrect. So should you be curious, you could go to that website and see who they've contacted recently, but if you have a complaint, you could submit complaints so then they could follow up on them. Just be aware of the tactics. Be aware that food industry, a lot of these big food companies use the same tactics that people use to sell everything else. And a lot of them, if you went to the salt, sugar, fat presentation by Michael Moss, he started doing research in the tobacco industry, and a lot of these companies came out of Philip Morris. So they use those same strategies to entice you to buy products. So, buyer beware. The other thing you should be aware of is there is going to be calorie labeling required in restaurants, and that's coming in December. One of your handouts has more details about that. We eat about 1/3 of our calories daily at restaurants. The regulations will require that calories appear on menus and menu boards, and there will be consistent labeling nationwide. And it's required for restaurants that have at least 20 or more restaurants. So it won't be like required of the little independent restaurants, but it's going to be required of those that are chains. Buffets and salad bars will have labeling next to the foods. Calorie information is not required like for daily specials, custom orders, or things that are seasonal. But they also have to provide written information that will have more detail on the other nutrients. So you will for sure have calories, but then if you want more details, they should be able to provide that to you. So this is a good thing because I think sometimes we like to be in denial and think ignorance is bliss, but I think when you actually see the real information of what was in that portion or that meal, it will lead to some change. I'll just split that with someone. I'll take half of it home, or I'm not going to order that. So it will have an impact. So in summary, some of the best food choices. First off, be aware that produce and many unprocessed foods do not have nutrition facts labels on them, but they are good choices. So, we know that we all need to eat more fruits and vegetables, just like your mom said. I will say it again, because we know they're packed with lots of good things that we need and have very few calories and fat. Shop around the perimeter of the store. A lot of the heavily marketed processed foods tend to be in the middle of the food stores, so try to shop the edges. Use farmers markets because you can get local produce there, and use your when you do choose processed foods, get the ones that have ingredients you are familiar with. So if it's got too many chemically sounding names, you may want to not pick that. And it has few items. You know, if it's got 25 items listed on the ingredient list, pretty processed. It has 5 or so, okay, I can handle that. And then read the label so that you can make your comparisons and judgments. And it does take more time, but once you have done that and then you have identified the things you know are things that you actually need for your health, then you got your shopping list. And you can continue to get those things until a new product comes out that's better. Takeaway message, and this comes from In Defense of Food, an Eater's Manifesto, which I highly recommend. It's very readable. Eat food, and when he says food, he means like real food, whole food, foods that we recognize, not highly processed, mostly plants. So mostly plants would cover fruits, veggies, nuts, legumes, grains, but not too much. So I think those are very simple, concrete things that hopefully you can take away and use. And since we're probably tight on time, I'm not going to make you watch this, but it's a short link, just remind you to read the label. You can look at it well. And I wanted to remind you that there are other classes coming that are on Wednesdays that you're invited to, and it looks like each class will count as an event. And do you have anything to add, Carrie? Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you for your time, and hope you got a few ideas of ways that you can alter your food choices to improve your health. Thanks.